Hi everyone, my name is Allison Vardy, and my day job is that I'm an instructor of biology and environmental science at College of the Siskiyous in Northern California. During the summertime for about the last 8 years, I've been involved with University of Michigan Biological Station researchers, trying to help them translate some of their research into outreach projects focused on generating classroom ready materials using their data and focused on their research. So I'm really excited to be a part of Team Typha. Again, I was one of the original members of the team, and I'm really excited to be helping them currently by generating some outreach materials, and I'm really looking forward to working with you in the generation of some of those materials. So really quickly, Team Typha is interested in increasing public awareness of their research. So that's one of the goals of this outreach project that we're embarking on. And as you know from Drew's presentation, Team Typha studies Great Lakes wetland ecology, also the effects of invasive species on specifically Great Lakes coastal wetlands, and some of the impacts of wetland restoration. So how can we reverse some of these impacts of wetland invaders? So they want to get it out there, spread the word about some of their findings, and they're also really interested in making contributions to Michigan science educators. So I'm really excited to have your ear today, because I think your involvement in the generation of these materials is going to make all the difference. We don't want to produce something that then sits on a shelf or sits up on the web somewhere and doesn't get used. We want to create materials that you're going to use, and that are going to help your students engage with Michigan wetlands. Really briefly, about the format, sort of, what we're thinking about, the big picture of the materials that we're going to produce. We're not intending to produce really polished lessons, that are linked to learning goals and have very specific questions and very specific outcomes. What we want to do is provide some basic nuts and bolts that allow you to produce those polished lessons. So you're the experts in helping your students meet these science and mathematics standards. So we're thinking what we'll do is something sort of like what the people who've generated the animal diversity web materials have done, where they've created a database about animal diversity that students can query and can learn a lot about animals using. But they just created the tool, and then as you can see here in this graphic, this is just a screenshot from their website. They've posted lessons that classroom teachers have generated that use that database, that animal diversity database. Same thing with these simulations that have been produced by the University of Colorado Boulder. So they've produced, for example, a natural selection simulation, the tools, the nuts and bolts. And then here's a place on their website where teachers have generated very specific lessons that utilize those tools. So that's what we're planning to do, generate the tools, and hopefully tools that inspire you to produce some really great lessons that engage your students in Great Lakes coastal wetlands. Okay, so I want to give you some ideas of the kinds of tools that we aim to produce. So when I sat down with some of you in July, I got the impression that you were interested in sampling protocols so that you could get your students out into a Great Lakes coastal wetland, or maybe even an inland wetland, and sample the vegetation, possibly the invertebrates. So what I'm working on right now is taking some of these standard protocols, so this is the Great Lakes wetland sampling form, and translating that into a more user-friendly protocol that you and your students can feel comfortable taking out into the field and using. So we think that you're going to be able to go out there and measure things like invasive plant density and invasive plant percent cover. And rather than, getting to know all of the species that you might possibly encounter in a Great Lakes coastal wetland, like you see listed here, this is just A through C. There's several pages of plant species names that are commonly found in Great Lakes coastal marshes. That's something that you need a lot of training to be able to do, but something like species richness, just counting the number of different plants that are there in a plot, can be really valuable information. So those are the kinds of things that we're trying to produce. User-friendly protocols that you can take your students out in the field and use for sampling your local wetlands. We'd also like to generate a common database, either through the University of Michigan Biological Station website or some other web-based database where you can upload the data that you collect using sort of a stripped down version of this form, so that you could analyze your own data or compare it to data that others have collected in other Great Lakes coastal wetlands. So those are the kinds of tools we aim to produce. We're also in the process of generating some videos that would provide some context and some background about Team Typha's research in Great Lakes coastal wetlands in general. We're also working on an invasive wetland plant identification video so that your students can go out there and really hone in on just the 3 or 4 invasive species that they might find in their local wetlands. So rather than learning 300, we'll just focus on the invaders. And you can still come up with some pretty useful measures of wetland quality if you know the cover, for example, of invaders. So we're generating a video to try to help you and your students do that. We're also generating a video that would allow your students to get to know some of these researchers that are involved with the project. And eventually, after we've hammered out these protocols, and we would like to make some videos of people out in the field demonstrating how to use them. Lastly, we realized that it might not be possible for a lot of teachers to get their students out into the field. So we intend to also generate classroom-based, some tools for classroom-based activities that are focused on Team Typha's research. We'd like to give your students some of the Team Typha raw data. This is a really complicated Excel spreadsheet. The one we generate will be pretty simple, so that they could, if you wanted them to, graph the data. This is an image of some of the Team Typha restoration data. We want to focus on the restoration, some of the restoration experiments that they've done, because that's not something that your students can do themselves out in the field. They can't really mow down cattails themselves, but we'd like them to learn about or know about some of the impacts the Team Typha restoration has had on wetland ecology. So we'd like to generate a stripped down Excel database so that your students can generate figures, or just supply you with some simplified figures that your students could interpret. They could look at and try to figure out what's going on here. Story's pretty clear. Up here we have invasive cattail dominance. And we can see that it was really highly dominant in Team Typha's research plots back in 2011. Then they implemented restoration treatments where the gray line shows what happened when they just harvested Typha above ground. The dashed line shows what happened when they harvested Typha above and below ground. So dominance went down in both of those treatments. The control plots, where they didn't manipulate them at all, Typha dominance stayed the same. And we can see when we look at the bottom figure here that had a big impact on species richness. So here we can see species richness staying at around 6 or 7. in the plots that were unmanipulated, but doubling in the plots where Team Typha eliminated some of the Typha glauca, the invasive cattail that was in their plots. So we want to be able to provide you not only with the protocols for sampling wetlands in the field, but also allow your students to get to know some of Team Typha's restoration work by possibly manipulating or just interpreting some simple graphs that show what they've learned. Okay, so in terms of timeline, I intend to complete drafts of the protocols that I talked about and the classroom-based activities and also the videos by May of 2018. I'm hoping that I'll be able to get together with some of you and some other teachers from the Lower Peninsula next summer to try them out, to show you what we've created, to go out into the field, use the protocols with Team Typha, and to get your input on it. I've done these kinds of teacher workshops before. That's what these pictures are of, and hopefully we can get some of you down to the biological station or in marshes, in your local marshes, getting to know some of these materials and giving us feedback. I would hope to have materials finalized and posted on the web in the fall of 2019 so that you can start using them. So in conclusion, we're really excited about working with you to generate materials that work well for you and your students. To get more feedback about the ideas that I've proposed, I've generated a paper survey that I'm hoping you'll fill out right now. And I really look forward to working with all of you, hopefully, in the future. Thank you.